Welcome to Innsmouth, stranger.
Hello travellers, and thanks for joining us today in Innsmouth on episode 38 of the Innsmouth Book Club. I'm one of your guides, Rob Poyton.
I'm one of the other ones, Tim Mendes. We will be joined later by our other guide, John Chadwick. He's gone ahead to the Gilman House with our guest to make sure they don't get lost down the waterfront.
Oh, you don't want to get lost down the waterfront in Innsmouth. Definitely not.
Yeah.
Now, you may remember from last time, we were initially going to visit the library today to start to discuss the Robert Bloch story. But I gather there's been some problems at the library. It's closed at the moment.
Yeah, there's some foul smell coming from the drains.
Oh dear.
Which is never good in Innsmouth.
No.
So I've had to call out Innsmouth Diner Rod to come and check it out, you know.
Is that a sort of tentacle with a sort of rubber plunger on the end?
Sort of a big sucker on the end, yeah.
So that's a sort of Doctor Who Dalek meets
meets Cthulhu.
Yeah.
There's a mashup, yeah. I like it. I'm writing that down.
That's another anthology. Every time we come up with an anthology idea.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's quite a nice day in Innsmouth, so we're going to take a little stroll down over to the Gilman House in a moment. Before we do, I just wanted to mention that Innsmouth Gold, we've renovated our website. If renovated is the word, makes it sound like we're sort of decorated or something.
Does you have the decorators in?
Yeah. Basically, we've tidied up the website, shall I put it like that?
Yeah.
And our range of T-shirts and other items is now available. So you can get T-shirts, books, our CDs and music downloads. And we've also got a nice range of decorative mugs at the moment.
Ooh!
Yeah, we've got an M.R. James, Edgar Allan Poe. We've got a sort of Nyarlathotep mug. So if we'll put the link is down in the show notes below. If you pop along there and you can see, you can click on T-shirts or mugs or music on the menu, and that'll take you straight to those pages.
Awesome. I am a sucker for a mug. I've got a good growing collection of daft mugs. One of my favourites is ones with Innsmouth fauna on it.
Oh.
So it's got all the it's a good one. I've got some pictures somewhere. I'll show them.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it's a good one.
We're actually working on a Cthulhu clock at the moment as well, which could be quite interesting.
Not a cuckoo clock, a Cthulhu clock. That's correct. The tentacle come out of a little doorway.
Now that would be something, wouldn't it?
Wouldn't it?
That would be something. And screams.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's brilliant.
We thought people might need something to check when the stars are right, you know. So it's.
This is it. Yeah. That's why they got like weird sundial things all over Innsmouth, isn't it?
Well, you don't want to get caught out, do you?
No.
Oh,
no.
The stars were right, but I missed it.
Yeah. There's a story in there somewhere as well, isn't there?
All right, so let's take a stroll across the square to the Gilman House. So welcome folks to the Gilman House. We're creeping up the stairs here in our normal furtive way, and we're heading for room 428. And here we are, and who's our special guest? It's Mr. Chris McAuley. Hi Chris, how you doing?
Hello folks, yeah, doing well, yeah.
Great, thanks very much for visiting us. Was this your first time in Innsmouth?
This is my first time in Innsmouth, yeah.
Are you enjoying it so far?
It's all right. There's a few dodgy looking people, as I tried to get into the room. They've got some gills and they looked a bit grey looking, but yeah, they let me in okay.
I've heard there's a handy lock on the trouser press you can use. If you want to put it on the door, that's what a lot of people.
Yeah, we definitely advise blocking the door at night because it can get a bit lively in here. I mean, we all leave, we leave our guests here for the night. We figure it's part of the Innsmouth experience.
Yeah.
That's all right. If you leave me a couple of bottles of Guinness, then I'm happy enough.
So we've got a lot of stuff to talk about. You've got quite an amazing resume, shall we put it that way? But perhaps we could start with something about your background and how you got into weird fiction and comics in general.
Sure, yeah. I was brought into comics by Pat Mills in 2018. I didn't know who the guy was, to be fair, at the start. I've been given a box of 2000 AD old 2080 comics by my brother-in-law, and it was this cardboard box that came out of his attic, and it was riddled with damp. Right, so it wasn't the nicest experience, but I started to become quite captivated by stories of flesh. The Invisible Man, and obviously some of the early Dreads. Having never read 2080 before. And this was about 5 years ago. So I joined the 2080 Facebook group and started writing reviews. One day, the guy who ran the group called me up, very excited, and saying, "Look, who's liking all your stuff? Pat Mills." And it was great. Thanks. She says, "You don't know who Pat Mills is, do you, Chris?" No. So he gave me a potted history. So Pat reached out to me eventually and said, "Look, would you proofread my book?" Then it was known as The Secret History of 2080, but it became Be Pure, Be Vigilant, Behave, the Torquemada phrase. And I proofread it, chatted to him. We would spend hours on Skype together, chatting about things. And that was a great experience. He started to talk to me about comics, comic book history, his slant on everything. And then he encouraged me in writing. And the first piece of writing I ever did was a piece of Judge Dredd fan fiction, which went into Sector 13. And then he gave me the nod to write for Finn, which I don't think he had ever allowed anybody to write any of his characters before. Wow. But he allowed me to write Finn. So anybody who knows anything about Finn, it's kind of an eco warrior style story. And what I did was I tied Finn in as an incarnation of Slain, which he loved. So he loved that. So that was the start of everything. And then it progressed onwards. I started writing more like fictional stories, fanzine stuff. I became a comic book colorist. Worked on 2008, did some as an assistant colorist to John Charles, did stuff for Roy of the Rovers, Dread. This was like the first comic I ever coloured was Dread.
What was school?
Which was an experience and a half. No pressure, fairly complicated. The Long Game. It was called The Long Game. It was written by Michael Carroll. So it started becoming fairly well known in 2000 AD circles, and then moved on then and started colouring Marvel stuff. Started colouring, a lot of indie comics. I think I've coloured to date in the last 3 years. I've coloured 22 comics. Wow. I've done all that sort of stuff. Worked with William Shatner, so then it started moving on to the comic writing, and I worked with Shatner.
I saw that. Yeah. How was that? I mean, was that? They say never meet your heroes. I mean, it's such an interesting guy.
I suppose it's now that the dust has settled. I can tell a full story about this. But the publisher called me up. So I'd worked on a vampire comic with this music guy, rock guy, Baron Mizraka. We've become really good friends now. And I coloured his comic, and the publisher, who I actually shopped his comic to this publisher, who took it, and then they rang me up and said, "Look, you don't have to take this job. In fact, I would completely understand if you didn't take it. It's Shatner, and we need a colorist, and it's fine." So I said, "Of course, I'll take it." My wife's a massive Star Trek fan, so she was really excited for this, Yeah. So I'm sitting in a meeting with him, and I'm being told that he sacked 5 artists already.
Yeah.
So the artwork was kind of like, some of it was great and some of it wasn't, and some of it was all over the place. So I'm looking at this stuff and going, Jesus Christ, I have to colour this. Oh God, right. Fair enough. So I'm sitting in the meeting with him, and I had just finished working on Star Wars. So I'd done some Star Wars projects. And he had heard about that, obviously. And he said, first thing he said was, "I heard that you've done something else called Star, but it wasn't as good as mine, was it?"
Yeah.
And then I happened to say to him, "Well, what was yours?"
Oh, hey.
and he was like, he said, "Star Trek." I said, "Never heard of it." "So what do you need me to do?" And then we get, and I asked him I asked the question, "How do you want to be lit?" And he liked that question, and I explained to him why, as a colorist, I wanted it. So I had 6 pages that I had to get done, and he reviewed every page personally. So I had 3 days to get 6 pages done. And I remember when I pressed the send button on the email, I turned to my wife and said, "This is the most nerve-wracking experience of my life."
I can imagine.
And he came back and he loved it, and it was fine. So I did three issues. I think I did 3 out of 4 issues of Man of War. And I do have a funny Shatner story. I think I'm allowed to tell it. If not, it's going to be too late.
Well, it's in Innsmouth, so it doesn't get out.
So I was in the bath, and the phone rings, and it's Shatner. So of course I do. Any person would do, just jump out of the bath, grab the phone, walk across naked across the hall, go into the bedroom, take a phone call. Oh, he's cool. And answer the phone. I said, "Hello, Mr. Shatner." He said, "Oh, please call me Bill." And I was like, "Okay, right." And he starts chatting to me about our project. And I happen to say to him, "Look, I have to be honest with you. I'm standing here absolutely bollock naked as the day I was born. Has that ever happened to you before?" And then he pauses a bit and he said, "Not with another man, no."
Nice.
So, that was it. I really enjoy working with him. He's a lovely guy. I've never had any issues at all whatsoever with the guy. So yes, I've done that, and then then we can move on to Stokerverse and what happened there if you want.
One thing I wanted to ask is you're talking about being a colorist there. What exactly? I mean, I have a vague idea of what that is.
Yeah.
What does that actually involve? How does
So you'll get the inks. So you'll get the line work and the inks, and then it's up to you to basically color it. So what you do is the first thing you do is flat it. So you just take basic colors, and I use Photoshop, digital colorist. So I flat just with basic colors, and then start doing shading. Now, in comic book circles, sometimes you have somebody who's called a flatter, and that's their core job, is that they'll actually do the basic colors, and then I'll go over to the colorist, and then you start to. But I do it. I like flatting and doing the coloring as well. So that's basically what it is. And you look at lights and shadows and all sorts of things. I was mentored. I was lucky because I was mentored by John Charles, and I was mentored by Kurt Michael Russell from Marvel.
Right.
And I kind of just ran with it. On Facebook, I do. I've lost the sight in my left eye, so I don't do it professionally anymore. Wow. So, but I still do it. I still do it for fun. So I still do a couple of things on Facebook. If the right opportunity came, I might go back. I might throw my hat in the arena again of coloring, but the writing is basically taken over now.
Yeah. So what's sort of the trickiest job you had as a colorist?
It might have been a Japanese comic that I did, and it was set in feudal Japan, and they wanted a watercolor feel to it. So I'd never done that before. So I had to go away, and I bought a Udemy course on watercolors, just standard watercolors, and then bought brush types for Photoshop, and kind of worked on that and did that. So I think that one, I can actually send you a page of that if you want to show that to your viewers.
Be cool. That'd be good.
I still have it. So that sort of like watercolor effect, and the publisher was happy with it. So I think being a colorist, there's some people who just do it paint by numbers. For me, every job's actually a challenge because I have to look at the scripts and look at, the line work, and you kind of hope that the artist is giving you some sort of indication of where the light's coming from. Yeah. Sometimes you're lucky if you get a really good comic book writer, they'll actually talk about the colors and what they're looking for.
Yeah.
So I think every job can be challenging in that respect. But yeah, there's sometimes that you're asked to move out your comfort zone a little bit, and you can't do it paint by numbers. You have to actually sit and think through it and learn new skills.
I was going to ask, did they send you ideas about colour palettes and things like this? Or not at all? No.
So it's all up to you.
No. I mean, if you're doing characters like Spider-Man and stuff, that's fine because he's got a standard palette. But other sort of I enjoy doing indie comics because they just say go for it. What happens is sometimes you do a page and then you'd be told, well, no, we want to change this, we want to change that, and that's where layering comes in really handy with Photoshop. So yeah, it sometimes it can be a bit of a nightmare, but again, it's the way you look at it. It could be a nightmare on one hand, or it could be a way of creative expression. Yeah, a greater creative expression or more.
Yeah. And 2000 AD was such a landmark comic. I mean, what was it? When was the first issue? Late 70s, something like that.
Yeah, 78, I think it was. 78.
Yeah. For me, it always aligned with punk and everything else.
I was just going to say, it sort of hit the same time as punk, didn't it?
Yeah. So do you think it still seems to have kept that hard-hitting angle, if you like? How do you think it's developed over the years? Has it changed very much?
Because I came to it, I came to it when I was in my 30s, from a box of grotty comics. I suppose I've got a different view on it. I remember Pat's told me all about the early years and what it's like and what happened and all of that sort of stuff. When I read through 2000 AD now, it's different. It's changed. Every generation of 2000 AD from 70s, 80s, 90s, especially in the 90s. The 90s were a massive change to that. Yeah. Whenever Dave Bishop came on board, and it changed. And I quite like the 90s version of 2000 AD.
It became painterly, didn't it, with Simon Bisley coming in?
Bisley stuff, yeah, absolutely. And I enjoyed all that, and I enjoyed the Dread stuff because it was grotesque. A lot of it was grotesque, but you had a lot of good stories at the Pit. Dread's the Pit. It's fantastic. And you've got the team ups with Mean Machine Angel and Judge Death. I think I can't remember what it was called, but it was to do with Texas. And they went out, and there was a President Clinton look-alike box, all of that sort of stuff. Brilliant. And I thought there was a lot more imagination. I didn't really get the early Dreads with Walter Little and those kind of comedy-like characters. That sort of humour isn't my form of humour. I'm more a Garth Ennis type guy.
Right. Yeah.
And that was Mer's Future Shocks were great.
Yes.
I thought they were brilliant. But I liked the imagination of the 90s. When it started to go into the 2000s, you could see the development of Dread. It was more of a police procedural. And that's where John Wagner wanted to take it anyway in the first place. He likes police procedurals. I don't know if you guys know the story about Carlos Esquerra and Dread. Carlos was a friend of mine before he passed away. He actually taught me a lot as well. Carlos told me about how he learned to draw, and it was through the cinema. It was through spaghetti westerns, and he would draw spaghetti westerns, and you can see that in his style. You can see that, and that's how he sort of
the eyes and
all of that. And he said that when he drew Dread and it went to Pat, it went to John. John looked at this and said, "This just looks like a fucking Spanish pirate. I'm not doing this," and threw it away. And then Pat basically picked it up. Carlos didn't do the first issue. It was Mike McMahon that did the first issue, but all based on Carlos's designs. And that's the famous story, and where Judge Dredd and the name came from was that Pat had this idea about a hangman. It was going to be a Hammer Horror type thing, a hangman called Judge Dredd.
Right.
And there was a ska artist, Pat was telling me, that was called Judge Dredd as well. Yeah, it was something like that. And he said basically it was like that. So that was where the name came from.
It was a Prince Buster song originally, but then there was a ska guy about the same time as Bad Manners and the like. He had
he was 70s. Judge Dredd was the white guy. He had big. He basically took the ska songs and rooted them up.
It was a bit like Blue Humour and a lot of them. There's a song called Up With The Cock, which I remember, about the cockerel waking him up, but it's not quite that.
Sounds like something that happened. And I mean, look, this is the thing. I'm coming from a completely different angle from a lot of people here, 2000 AD fans. I actually don't call myself a fan of anything. I think fandom kills creativity. I'm a big believer in that, and I think it's dangerous because fandom can pin you into a particular place and make you stay there.
Right, yeah.
And, I think you have to be experimental in franchises. I mean, at the minute, I like Star Wars Visions, anime stuff that came out on Disney Plus. It was vibrant. It's all the stuff I didn't like, but you have to be prepared to not like something and just allow that to grow,
It is this idea of canon. I mean, we see it probably most in Lord of the Rings, the Middle-earth, the Tolkien stuff, where it is so, and maybe Who as well. And I think one thing we often say about Lovecraft and the mythos or cosmic horror in general, there are these guidelines, if you like, but you feel like you've got much freer reign as a writer to bring in new ideas or to interpret these things in different ways. No one's going to say, Cthulhu, it should have 10 tentacles, not 8,
Yeah.
2000 AD fandom, Glenn Fabry was able to tell me how many links on Dread's badge there was. I used to go out drinking with Glenn. There was a famous time I went out drinking with Glenn, and he showed me, he was doing the cover of Misty. Misty. He brought it into the pub, rolled up. He shows me this, the pencils. And I'm like, when does that need done? Tomorrow. And I'm like, and he did get it done. He got it done the next day. A lot of Glenn's another amazing guy, another amazing artist. I've been very privileged and fortunate in my career to have learned from so many people.
Speaking of which, there's a name that will be very familiar to any horror fan, and that is Stoker, of course. Could we talk a bit about the Stokerverse and how that came about and what exactly it is?
Yeah, so I wrote a vampire in space comic.
Vampires in space.
It's published in its house, and it was called Dracula: Lord of the Future. And I didn't think much of it, but other people liked it. And for those people who did like it, thank you, because it kickstarted this off. So Decker Stoker, the great grandnephew of Bram Stoker, saw the comic, loved it, sent me an email and said that he wanted to chat to me about a possible project. So, of course, I took that phone call. It's like, and the original project was 1 or 2 comics updating Bram Stoker's classic short story collection. So the first one that we looked at was unfortunately titled The Skull, and I do apologise for anybody that offends, but that's the original title of it.
Right.
We renamed it. I renamed it The Virgin's Embrace because it's about the Virgin of Nuremberg. And EC Comics ran a very famous I think it was 8-page strip depicting the story. So I wrote, I think the script was 30 pages, adding a lot more to it. So we actually put Bram and Florence into the story because we believe that Bram and his wife Florence were on honeymoon at the time in Nuremberg. Bram Stoker was the manager of the Lyceum Theatre, and he would have been in charge of going to Europe and looking for suitable backdrops. Bram Stoker was a painter as well. He created the Dublin Painter and Illustrator Society. So that's what he was in Nuremberg for. Nuremberg's also very important to Dracula fans because Sigmundsson gave the Order of Dracul to Vlad II in Nuremberg. That was where it was actually instituted. So we pepper it with that. And I took the story and I looked at it and I realized that, so the antagonist, or traditionally the antagonist, is a guy called Elias. Elias is based in Buffalo Bill. Bram Stoker actually helped with the Buffalo Bill show in America. And I took Elias as a Buffalo Bill inspired character, but made him Quincy Morris's father. So started to integrate Dracula a little bit with it. Events happen and a kitten is killed. And at that moment, the Muller cat looks up, and there's that moment that happens between Elias and the Muller cat. and it reflects then on this native lady who he encountered. So then I extrapolated that story out,
right,
and actually gave Elias the feeling of PTSD, that it's not just he's a bad guy, he's not a bad guy. So I fleshed out the story a little bit. I did it as sensitively as I could, and then we got Jessica Martin, who Doctor Who fans know Jessica Martin. Yep. She illustrated it.
Oh, excellent,
and it was beautifully done. Jessica's really good with faces, and that was the reason why, because the story has to be told through the face of the characters. And she did a beautiful watercolor effect with it as well. So that was an interesting collaboration. She would ring me up at nights, and we would talk through the pages, and she did a magnificent job of it. And then we put the original story at the front, and we put a lot of stuff from the Stoker archives in there as well. So it's a nice hardback book. And it was up for Bram Stoker. I reached the Bram Stoker reading list this year, which I was very proud of.
Yeah.
So that was her debut graphic novel, and I didn't want to just do Dracula at the start, because I wanted to set out and stall Stokerverse wasn't like Bram. It's not just Dracula. Bram wrote romances, he wrote dramas, he wrote cosmic horror. Yeah, he wrote horror. So that was the first one. And then I came up with this idea of the Stokerverse. There was a unified horror universe inspired by Bram Stoker. And I was talking to a friend about it, and it came out. So I have these weird working hours. Like I start work at midnight, my time in Canada, and my friend rang me up about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and I just came out with this thing. Right. Stokerverse. And he said, that's great. So then I pitched it to Decker. He loved it. And we got publisher very quickly. It didn't take long, to be honest. And then I started to mix, because it has to be different. So I started to integrate the White Worm, layer of the White Worm story in with Dracula. Then the weirdest thing happened, where I woke up at midnight, sat down and decided I was going to write an audio play. I'd never written an audio play before in my life. I had never any sort of understanding, but I was typing away, and I could see everything very clearly, and I was just writing. And that became Voices of Dracula. And Voices of Dracula's snapshots of characters from Dracula talking about the events of Dracula.
Nice.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So and as I was writing this, I was sending this in real time to the actors that I wanted to play the role. So God knows, there's probably got spelling mistakes and all grammar mistakes. I don't know. But anyway, it achieved the desired effect. So the first person we got on board was Terry Malloy, Davros.
Yeah. So incredibly jealous now. I love Terry Malloy's portrayal of Davros.
Yeah, he's one of the nicest guys. And I said, okay, you're Renfield. Nice. I said, you're definitely Renfield, because Renfield to me is a character who is sane, but he has been driven mad and by things that he cannot understand, and passions and all sorts of things. So I'll talk about it later when we come to Dracula's Bedlam, but I have Renfield at Hyde Park, the start of the audio, and he is reciting The Body Electric by Walt Whitman, because Bram Stoker and Walt Whitman had a friendship. Bram wrote lots of letters to Walt Whitman. There was a real connection there with the work, and it was surprising. Renfield as a prophet at the start of the audio, and then it sort of tells how he then goes to the asylum, and then the second story is Renfield in a dream meeting, or going to see Dracula in the dream, and something happens. Then the second set of stories was Mina. Yeah, it was Mina. Mina, and I got Jessica to play Mina. Nice. So it's Mina after sort of Jonathan's confession over what happens with the three ladies,
Right.
and then Mina after her encounter with Dracula. And I remember ringing Jessica up. I've sent her the thing, and I said, "Okay, look, what do you think about this?" And she said, "This is brilliant. This is," like she said, there's a part in the when she's reciting the incident that happened to Dracula, where Dracula takes his long nails and covered with dirt, he cuts himself open, and blood and pus is pouring out, and he just grabs Mina's head and he slams it to his cold dead chest. I said, "There's nothing erotic about Dracula." I said, "This is what people get it completely wrong."
Yeah.
I said, "This is what this is." And why Dracula is doing that is because he knows these guys are going to burst in, and then he's going to look at Jonathan, and then he throws Mina to the side as if to say, "I've just degraded and defiled your wife. Do you want her now? How perfect is she now?" It's that corruption and it's that transgression of the vampire. So she loved it, so we did that. And then it's terrible. My memory's starting to go with all these characters that I created. Colin Baker was Van Helsing. So I wrote Van Helsing as somebody who had hubris, and my methodology with Dracula and Van Helsing is the fact that Dracula isn't coming to London for a booty call. People think this because of the Ford Coppola version of Dracula. But what he's coming to is it's the seat of the empire, and he's a warlord, and he wants to take over the world. So of course he's going to come to England, right? But he's got his ancient enemy, Van Helsing. So what he does is he seduces Lucy because he knows Lucy's connection to Seward and Seward's connection to Van Helsing. This is a direct challenge to Van Helsing. And he knows Van Helsing's hubris. He will say, "I will be able to save Lucy." And Dracula knows he can't. So what happens is then that he wants to leave Van Helsing friendless, because Van Helsing turns to his friends and says, "Okay, you loved him, you loved her. Now I have to defile her memory and say that she's a blood-sucking beast who's kidnapping children. And now I'm going to ask you to defile her body by cutting her head off and sticking garlic in her mouth."
Nice.
And then Dracula is hoping that will leave Van Helsing friendless. So I have those two scenes. And Colin did them amazingly well. Colin actually wrote a Dracula musical. He was telling me about this. He wrote a Dracula musical, and he recorded a lovely video from Stokerverse where he's dressed in his Sixth Doctor pajamas. Nice. And he's showing a scene. He's showing a scene of himself on stage as Van Helsing. And again, a lovely man, absolute joy to work with. And then we had our Dracula, and I did not think I was going to get this guy. So Simon Templeton, he uses both. So if you've ever played the Legacy Kane games, Kane, Legacy Kane, but he's known for Angel Buffy, all this kind of stuff. Yeah. So I said, I said to my wife, "There's no way I'm going to get this guy. Hollywood actor, no way I'm going to get him." But she said, "Send him the script. Honestly, it's good." So I sent him the script, and he wants a Skype call with me. And I remember I was sitting on the sofa going, "Right, okay, this is interesting." So lift the phone, and he's in his sports car in LA, driving down. He's getting his wife bagels in the middle of the pandemic. So I was like, "Jesus Christ, man! What are you, the expendable one, man?" So he pulls the car over and he starts chatting to me, and we get talking about a whole lot of things. And he said to me, "Look, you're not going to be able to afford me, so I'll tell you what, I'm going to do it for free."
Wow.
He said,
good.
Wow. "Look, he said, you've written the story." He said, "My son read it at the table, my wife read it at the table. They've told me I had to do it."
Wow. Nice.
And we became mates then. I have this dream that eventually I'll be able to move back home, and we'll just live by the sea in a little village called Carnock. Every Friday night I'll go down and get fish and chips and beer and stagger home. And he said to me, he said, "If that's your dream," he said, that's a great dream. And he told me a bit about LA. I would not want to live in LA. Sorry. I wouldn't want to live in LA.
No, I wouldn't. No.
I couldn't live there. Because he was gagging for a decent pint, and he was gagging for fish and chips. So we got chatting, and then he said to me, "You know who my wife is, don't you?" I went, "No." He said, "Well, my wife was Kiko O'Brien in Star Trek," and and he started telling me about him and his wife and stuff like that. She wants a part of Stokerverse as well, apparently. So I think I've cast her as Lucy. I think we've cast her as Lucy. So then the last person was Claudia. I mean, Claudia Christian. Everybody knows from Babylon 5 and other things.
Yeah.
And I wrote a completely new character for her called Thief. And she serves as a prequel and a coda to the story. So why Dracula wants Carfax estate. Yeah. That's her story. And then at the end, we actually get a glimpse of what Dracula's been doing in London and how he's been infiltrating the establishment. And there's a few vampires and the nobility that he's left behind. Right. So that was the audio drama. And then I was writing all these different ones. I think I've written 20 stories for anthologies in the last year that we're starting to flesh out stories with Van Helsing and all sorts of things. And then we had Dracula's Bedlam, which was a novel that I had written with John P. Again, a Doctor Who fame. And John's an interesting character because John was best mates with Terry Nation. He created the Daleks. And Terry Nation started his career. And in a way, John's always been this kind of mentor to me because I remember when I went to the library when I was a kid, there was always his Dalek stories I left out. Yeah. It was actually John that introduced me to Doctor Who because when I grew up, there was no Doctor Who on TV. So it was his books. I was with it, and I think it was one of the New Adventure books. It was Time Worm Genesis, which you still have. Yeah. And that was my first.
The Virgin New Adventures.
That was the one, and that was my introduction to Doctor Who.
Yeah, I was collecting them because that was the wilderness years, wasn't it?
Yes, the wilderness years, and there was actually more creative output in the wilderness years.
There was, than there is now. I loved those Virgin New Adventures. Some of the themes and stuff were just mind.
Cardinals, Warlock, and Warhead. I actually spoke to Andrew Cartmel about that, and I told him that I read Warlock when I was 7, and I was like, what? You shouldn't have had that book in your hands when you were 7. Very irresponsible librarians there, you know. But it was great writing with John. And John has never done collaborations. I'm the first collaboration he's ever, and he paid me the tribute. We did a YouTube interview, and he paid me the tribute that he didn't want to do Dracula, but I made it sound so interesting to him, and I was a great collaborator. So we're continuing to collaborate to this day. We've actually written a Doctor Who Dalek story that's come out in Doctor Who magazine this year, and other things that we can talk about later.
Chris, I've got a family connection to Stoker and Doctor Who.
Oh, okay.
You probably haven't. You probably don't even know about. My sister's partner, his father comes from a theatrical family up in Berwick upon Tweed. They ran theatres for years. So his grandfather, I believe it was his grandfather, his great-grandfather, was a big friend of Bram Stoker's. But my sister's partner's father was one of the producers on Doctor Who.
Oh, okay.
I'm not sure when it was. I mean, I've got mixed stories that it was when it started or it was when Sylvester McCoy was. I can't make head nor tail of it. But I just thought, here you are talking about Doctor Who and mixing it with Bram Stoker, and it's very valid. It's actually very valid.
Well, I've written for a couple of Doctor Who annuals right this year, and it's like I did. It was weird because Jessica and I did a McCoy annual. And she did the line work and I coloured it, and it was a picture of herself and Sylvester. And then I wrote a little piece about Jessica's character. And then Stephen Wyatt, who wrote Paradise Towers and Greatest Show in the Galaxy, he created Mags, and he gave me the green light to write Mags's origin story.
Oh, that's awesome.
So I wrote Mags's origin story, and he loved it, absolutely loved it, and it went out in the annual. And then I get asked to come back once. This was actually before the Stokerverse, just as the Stokerverse was sort of starting. And then I get asked to come back to do the Colin Baker annual. So I interviewed Bonnie Langford, and she's lovely, lovely lady. And then I wrote a couple of Dracula crossovers. So one's Dracula and the Master, and the other is Dracula and Cybermen and Daleks. And then I'm in an 8th Doctor annual. With a crossover between the Time Lords and the Vampire Wars. And I postulate in both the 6th Doctor Annual and in the 8th Doctor Annual that Rassilon was actually a vampire. So
Nice.
that got greenlit. Everybody seemed, BBC and everybody seemed happy with that. So it was like, okay, well, fair enough. So that's the other connections I have to Doctor Who as well. That sort of stuff. But we did in Bedlam. It was kind of a mixed media. We had a lot of comic book strips as well in there, sort of telling the origin story of Dracula. And because Dracula's not Vlad, by the way. Bram Stoker never wrote Dracula originally as Vlad.
Oh, right. You're separating him from Tepes then. You're making a different... Right.
Yeah. He was never, Bram Stoker wrote him as Count de Vil. His original name was Count de Vil in the manuscripts. And that was because he was supposed to be Count Devil. He was supposed to be the devil's representative on Earth.
Right.
Uh-huh.
So there's a story that I've written, which is I've got a series of Dracula origin stories that are coming out this year. And one of them states very clearly that the origins of Dracula and linked to the Scholomance, which was a real magical skill. And he did go there. And it was always said that the 10th child was given to the devil. And Dracula was that child that was given to the devil.
Right.
So that's out this year as well. So the Stokerverse is just this. It's just a very wide range, but very it's very influenced by Bram. And then I've created another range, Dark Universes. So that's with Claudia Christian. So we're doing our sci-fi stuff with her. We've got comics and books and games coming out now as well.
I was just going to say, with the Stokerverse, that's such a rich concept and such a great idea, and it seems to have such depth to it. Would we see as an offshoot from that RPGs, computer games, maybe even movie franchise, that kind of thing?
That's what's happening. Yeah. So we've got our first RPG coming out with Nightfall Games any day now.
Wow.
Nice.
Layouts are just about finished. So it's a story that Andrew Brown, who's our games master, and myself crafted. Illustrated by Clint Langley. Illustrations are incredible. So it's coming out. The first version is coming out. It's a quick start and it's going to be free. We're going to make it freely available and drive-through RPG site. And that's a little taster for the core book, which will be out in October time. And we also have a quick start too, as well. It'll be part of our campaign later on in the year. So what we do is we're blending the first quick start. You get to it's a sequel to Dracula basically, and you get to play as some of the characters in Dracula. We have Bram wrote 4, and I use the word brides, but they're not brides. That whole concept of bride came with the films. And there are 4 women who are in Dracula's castle.
Yeah. And
the 4th was never used in the book. So the backstory is that the book that you hold Dracula is not the real Dracula book.
Right.
When Bram had the original manuscript, he gave it to the Archibald and Constable, the publishing company in England. And he also wrote the words, "This story is true." First thing they said was no to the word, "This word's true."
Can't have that.
And they stripped the novel back to what you have now. It's complete. So what you have now is Dracula is completely redacted. Yeah. So what Decker and I are doing is we're taking the stuff that was left out and we're putting it into various transmedia.
Nice
as well. So we're trying to give fans the full true version of Dracula.
That's awesome.
Yeah. As it was intended, and we do that with the RPG. So the 4th, you would be interested. You'll be sort of introduced to the 4th bride, and I've used some of the notes that Bram's written, some of the other bits and pieces, and then I've created this new character. So that's the RPGs. We've also got a board game with some RPG elements coming out with Trinity Odd, and it's more of a steampunk universe.
Cool.
So I've tried not to limit the Stokerverse to just pure Gothic horror, but we've got a steampunk universe. And this is set in alternative London, and there's a mysterious gas that has appeared, and domes have been erected over London. And the rich are sort of safe with the domes, but there's various creatures starting to appear, and this is all linked to the White Worm mythos and Dracula mythos.
Nice. Yeah.
And then we have a miniature war game that's come out with Cricket Dice, which is based on the Dracula novella, a novel, and I've extrapolated some scenarios with that. And yeah, that's an interesting one. Miniature games it's fascinating. It's a fascinating world, which I was introduced to through that. So those are there's basically 6 game products coming out with Stokerverse.
That's amazing.
And we've got the sequel to Dracula comic that Decker and I've written is coming out in the next 3 months, I think it is. It's work started on that already with illustrations. And we have a Renfield comic, which is coming out next month for the Dragfest, which from Legacy Comics. So in that, I tell the story of how Renfield met Dracula.
Ah, excellent.
Because that's obviously a precursor.
The gaming world just seems to keep on expanding and expanding. I know we're sort of back in the day of D&D and then Call of Cthulhu, and I know Tim and I have spoken a lot before about Vampire the Masquerade, which was a sort of game changer. Yeah,
I was just thinking when you were talking about the RPG of thinking, I wonder if I can get my old Vampire the Masquerade group back together for that.
There's a great documentary about that on Amazon Prime at the moment. I don't know if you've watched it.
I watched it. Yeah. To me it's fascinating. I never dabbled in. I was always a computer gamer. Yeah. So I never dabbled in RPGs, pen and paper RPGs. But I've obviously started to now.
Yeah.
I'm reading through a lot of the books, and I read through the Vampire Masquerade Clan books, the 20th anniversary books, and the flavour of Vampire the Masquerade is obviously very punk and modern. And,
yes.
And very Anne Rice as well.
It's Anne Rice.
Yeah.
Stokerverse is more visceral.
Yeah.
It's more Clive Barker than Anne Rice.
Oh, nice.
You'll meet people with various degrees of insanity and all sorts of things happening.
Mm-hmm.
The Dracula that we portray is not somebody that you would ever want to meet or fuck or have a drink with.
Yeah.
Well, this is very much the thing, because even in Anne Rice, they're very beautiful creatures, aren't they?
Yeah.
You know, they're quite aristocratic still. There's that seduction element, whereas you think about it, you're kissing an undead, like you say, the cold chest.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, the smell and everything else. There's nothing romantic.
So definitely more Max Schreck than Christopher Lee.
Oh yeah, well let's be honest here. If it came down to it, if an Anne Rice vampire went into a pub in London, they would get the shit kicked out of them.
Yeah.
And that's the difference between Dracula and an Anne Rice vampire. When Stoker wrote Dracula, I mean, Dracula, even the physical description, it's very rare. We've seen. I mean, why Decker and I started this? Because there has to be a reason. We're not just churning out Dracula again after 125 years, churning out the same shit all over again. It's going back to the original. Now, going back to the original, which is fascinating, is actually a fresh and novel concept, because you've had 125 years of interpretations of Dracula. But the original Dracula, I mean, he was a cold, cunning spider in a web. He played with people. He was a narcissist, sociopath, and he had hairs in the palms of his hands. And I always say, there's nothing attractive or sexy about this guy. He didn't dramatically become younger, as we see in the Ford Coppola film. He was slightly younger. I always love the description where when Harker opens up the box and sees him, he's lying there, sort of fat and bloated like a leech, because that's exactly what he is.
Yeah.
Yes.
Exactly.
And the reptilian crawling down the walls and all of that sort of stuff.
Yes.
That's the scene I love the most. That's the one that always stuck with me and went, this isn't the Dracula that I was led to believe when I first read it.
But that aspect of the wolf as well is almost like a werewolf in some ways.
There's some interesting interpretations of that, because whenever I was reading, I was very privileged to get an annotated Dracula, which hasn't been released yet, and they look at the wolf character as the wolf that comes into Lucy's bedroom, smashes into Lucy's bedroom, may not be Dracula. It may have been the wolf from the zoo.
Right.
and that transformation into the wolf. There's always a link between werewolves and vampires and sort of some mythologies. But, my interpretation has been that the wolf was actually, that was why Dracula released the wolf in the zoo. Right. And that's why it's written in the book, because it's a bit of a throwaway thing that this wolf is unleashed in London if you don't use it as some sort of narrative device later. And there is still garlic in the room, even though that, because Lucy's Muller's in the room, and then she has the heart attack. And remember, Dracula kind of floats in the air, like moats as well, into Lucy's room. So that that's the interpretation that I take in the wolf.
It's Pavlov's wolf, basically.
There's a lot with Whitby, because obviously he stayed there an awful lot, as did Lewis Carroll. I mean, whether or not they were there at the same time as each other, I'm not sure. But certainly the ship crash was an actual event. There was no dog that leapt off it, but there are Black Shuck legends around that area, which I would have been aware of. So, I mean, what he's cleverly done is taken something which he would have, two things he would have been aware of. One, I'm not sure if he was there at the time that the ship crashed or not, but he's already feeding from different sources and bringing them together into this whole wolf thing. But the lycanthropy has been in vampire mythos for quite a long time, hasn't it?
Yeah, you bury it. Sometimes it's interchanged. You bury a vampire at crossroads, and it becomes a werewolf, and all of this kind of stuff, and these sort of fictitious tales and all of this sort of stuff. They're very powerful, and I think more so because Hollywood got hold of them. And we see a resurgence. It's interesting, as you always see a resurgence of zombie and vampire stuff during pandemics and contagions. And there's always there's a very powerful link to that, and that's why we're seeing a resurgence of vampirism.
And they were supposed to be doing sort of rebooting the Universal Monsters franchise, weren't they, to an extent, with the Mummy and the Wolfman and everything else. But I think it got sort of stalled after the Tom Cruise one. It's
kind of that's sort of canned now. It's hard. Because what you're trying to do is you're trying to make monsters heroic. And the purpose of monsters, it's not to make them heroic. Even Frankenstein's creature isn't that heroic, really, because he forces his creator to create a mate for himself, and does so very cruelly. And I think it's because you have the universal, the sort of the gentle parts of the universal monster, of the blind man and the daughter and all of that. But actually Frankenstein's creature is quite cunning in how he uses the blind man, because he knows he can't see him. And Frankenstein's monster in the novel is very articulate. I can confirm that you will meet the creature in the RPGs as well. We do have Jack the Ripper and Frankenstein's creatures, and we have all sorts of things.
Nice. I was going to ask because obviously there was when the Buffalo Bills Theatre was in London, was at the time of the Jack the Ripper murders. Because there's actually because I've done a lot of amateur Ripperology myself, and there is actually a theory. Like, one of the more outlandish Ripper suspects is Bram Stoker. Which I always thought was really, really funny. It's the book worth reading, but it's one of the more ridiculous ones.
There's a guy called Neil Story who writes about Ripper and Dracula. And where a lot of that comes from is in one of the books in the London Library that Bram used. He actually defaced them. He wrote notes on them. And he put Ripper ? All of it. And you have to think about the time that Dracula was written. You've got Jack the Ripper, you've got Mansfield, who's Jekyll and Hyde. You have the stuff going on in the Lyceum. You've got Henry Irving. So my theory is Henry Irving's Dracula. Basically, that's what who Bram was talking about, and Dracula being real.
He even wanted him to play Dracula for the first reading, right? It was going to be a
reading thing. And he once he finished it, he said dreadful. Walked away. And people don't know what that actually means. Was it dreadful just because it was too long? Was it dreadful because he didn't like it? Or was it full of dread? There's three interpretations in that, so...
Too many notes.
That's it, isn't it? The Mozart thing. But
He wasn't a nice man, was he?
Well, yeah, I wouldn't have wanted to go for a pint with him. I mean, he was a Freemason like myself and Bram and stuff. And, there was obviously the connection. He actually brought Bram into the Freemasonry. Bram's brother, who we suspect was based, that Van Helsing was based on, was a doctor. Forney Stoker. And he was a Freemason. And there's a lot of connections between magic and Bram, because Pamela Coleman Smith, who illustrated the AU8 tarot cards, she was the illustrator of White Worm.
And wasn't his wife in the Golden Dawn as well?
Allegedly. So we don't have the membership books. Golden Dawn was held in the Mark Master, Mason Hall, and then was destroyed by Alistair Crowley. Thanks, Alistair. Right. And with we don't have any records, really, but we suspect that Bram was a member. To what degree, we don't know.
Which ties us back to the Ripper thing and like the From Hell version, doesn't it? Quite nicely.
Yes. Well, the Masonic connection as well, because there's always been the theory that the Ripper was a Mason because of the spelling of Jews in the graffito, the Gulston Street graffito. Yes. The Jews are the men that will not be blamed for nothing, because it's spelt EWES or something like that.
JWES, I think.
Yeah, and so people have always thought that it was Masonic.
Yeah.
And there's all sorts of interesting things where they've plotted out the murders on a map and come up with the points of a pentagram, and so that's another reason, because the Golden Dawn was always a suspected thing in it, with Robert Dunstan Stevenson
from Hull.
Is one of the more plausible suspects, but I don't, because he's our connection down here.
I would go with Cornwall's theory. I actually go with Cornwall's theory and that's who I've based our Ripper on, pretty much. Yeah. The artists, and he was a sociopath as well.
Joseph Sickert, yeah.
There's an interesting Bradford connection to the Golden Dawn and also the Ripper that isn't often talked about. Bradford at the time was a really major city in this country, very, very, very wealthy due to all the mills and the wool mills. And that had quite a prominent Golden Dawn lodge in it, which then broke off because they weren't very into women taking over and becoming quite large, big names within the order. And it just so happened that one of the places where they used to meet was in this hotel, which is now a car park, apparently. And then there's a connection to basically the people who were running the hotel just happened to be in receipt of letters from Jack the Ripper that had been sent to them, that they found in their home, as if somebody had actually come in and written them and left them. And it's something that's never really discussed and never really explored that much. But it's quite significant in that there were letters. I mean, if any of the letters were written by the same person or not, I don't know. But I just think it's quite interesting.
We'll have to do a Ripper episode sometime, I think. Definitely. It crops up quite.
Oh, yeah. Well, I actually, speaking of which, I did a Ripper Cthulhu anthology that I put together a few years ago. I put it together. It's called 13 Victims. It's available on Amazon. And it's, does the Ripper murders and all that.
It's a very rich character to use. I mean, that's why we use him in the Stokerverse.
Yeah.
We use him, how I've portrayed Jack the Ripper in the Stokerverse is that he was an artist, the Dracula. When Dracula was on the Demeter, he was basically starting to influence people in London so that he had soldiers and he had people, and that's what happened. And then he gets brought into the asylum for a reason, much like Renfield. There's a reason to everything that Dracula does, and that's and that's really important. I mean, Renfield to me, when I started to look and write Renfield came from a very strict Catholic background. His father was disappointed with him because he liked to go to, they use the 10 bells. He likes to go to the 10 bells and drink. And he likes women, but he never touches them because he's got repressed sexuality because of Catholicism. And he's a partner in the Hawkins law firm, and that's why he gets sent out to Dracula. And when he meets Dracula, there's something very powerful that happens, because he's got the god of thou shalt not. He's got a father who restricts him. And in Dracula, he's got a very permissive god and a very permissive father who basically says, here's 3 women, go and shag them. And that's the power of Renfield in the Stokerverse. And that's what I introduced, because he's an interesting character. And then John Peel and I, remember we ended Bedlam, and we brought Renfield back in a particular way, because I honestly like the character, and there's a lot more in. He's a very interesting character, and portrayed poorly, mostly poorly. I think he has moments of sanity. I think he's a prophet. I think he has moments of sanity, and he was a very educated man, and he knew Seward. He knew Seward and Holmwood before he went into the asylum. That's part of the original manuscripts, right, as well, part of the notes. So yeah, it's.
I love Tom Waits, but his Renfield was just Tom Waits, wasn't it?
Yes, that's it. I mean, that's why I love Malloy. Whenever Terry did Renfield, he got it straight away, because he did do a version. He did do bits of versions of Davros, but Davros was somebody who was incredibly intelligent and sane.
Yes.
But passionate.
Very softly. I loved Malloy's portrayal of all of the portrayals of Davros, because he had that brilliantly soft-spoken and rich, kind of cultured
revelation
voice.
of the Daleks.
And you had the face.
When he texts the girl,
yes,
and he starts talking about Chobel,
yes,
and starts to use and that's what always came into my head. That was actually whenever I was writing it, I told Terry about this.
Revelation. That whole seduction of her, and it's very, very manipulative.
And that's kind of that's sort of Renfield too.
Great healer.
Yes, that's it. That was what I did with Renfield and Jack the Ripper. So nice. It's the ongoing tales of the Stokerverse will have those characters. We'll have those characters there. I mean, the Ripper character. He's not exactly human, as well. We put that in a little bit, and exploring that through the games, through the RPGs. So we're hoping that the RPGs are an experience, and like Nightfall, working with Nightfall's been a dream. They're a great company to work with.
They're good.
And I've worked with them now on the Terminator as well. I'm allowed to talk about that. So the first Terminator book is due out soon. If you were a Kickstarter, you'll have the alpha build of it. But it's the actual book's due out soon. So it's been lovely working with them. Even just writing in other franchises with them.
So if we can finish with Mr. Lovecraft and the sort of genre of cosmic horror, how much of an influence has that been in your work? And are you also, did you say you're writing Lovecraftian poetry?
Yeah, I saw some on the Lovecraft e-zine. Yep. Yeah. It's good. Yeah, very good.
Oh, yeah. Thanks for reading that. Yeah. Thank you. Lovecraft, here's the strange thing. I'd never read him before I wrote Lovecraftian horror.
Really?
I do have the Alan Moore, the one that Alan Moore does the intro to.
Right.
And I've read 3 stories of Lovecraft. I promise I'll be reading more. It's the themes of cosmic horror are very prevalent, and I think it's come through maybe from films like The Thing,
yes,
and which are obviously Lovecraftian.
We've said before, even if you've not read Lovecraft, which a lot of Lovecraftian creatives kind of haven't in a way, the influence is so pervasive that you can't help but have been touched by it.
You can, and it's that, and it was really whenever somebody said to me, it was a video game company. We're in talks with Beamdog at the minute for video game in the Stokerverse, and one of the lead writers said, what you're doing there is very Lovecraftian. I love the fact that you've got elder gods such as the White Worm. So the White Worm is a larvae of the gods that exist beyond, that have been thrown out from the previous universe, and the White Worm's the larvae of that. And then from the White Worm that's where vampirism comes from in the Stokerverse. It's fairly influential. I want to start reading Lovecraft. I like the fact that it's very abstract. Now, Lovecraft's very hard to read, and again, I'm calling this from a neophyte angle. It's very hard to read, but the thing is that there's so many gaps that the imagination's allowed to breathe through the gaps.
Yeah.
So that's why I started into Lovecraftian poetry, and writing for Lovecraftina has been wonderful.
Yes. I spotted that. You're in the latest edition.
Yeah, I'm in a front cover of that actually. Nice.
Nice one. I'm in next month.
Great. I'm in that one as well. They came to me. I've done a fantasy. We've got a fantasy universe now called Dark Legends. Right. We have a comic book in it, and we've got a couple of short stories. And one of the short stories for that got accepted by it's called Hybrid Monsters Anthology. And then the second story got accepted by Lovecraftina last week. So I love working with those guys. And
Gavin Chappell from Lovecraftiana is a really nice guy.
Yeah, it's brilliant. And he's fostered me quite a lot too. So that, and then I've got a book of Lovecraftian poetry coming out called New World Monsters. So that's getting published by Hellbound books.
Oh, nice. I'm in a couple of their anthologies actually.
So yes, I'm curating the vampires one and the sci-fi one.
Right.
So everybody wants to.
Excellent.
So doing that. Yeah. We've got that coming out, and then we've got a Lovecraftian Dracula poetry book coming out. So it's basically a story. It's a story, but it's done in poetic prose. So I've been exploring poetry quite. And I have to give a mention to horror scene as well, because I'm in horror scene with Lovecraftian poetry. So it's not really a genre that I deliberately went into. It just happened. And I've been seen as an apologist for the demiurge through a lot of it. Through Gnostic. My PhD's in theology, so it's
right.
It's that Gnostic, the Gnostic studies. So I find the Gnostic gods to be fascinating as well. So that's the influence that has come through, not directly from Lovecraft's work, but a little bit from inside. The thing is that we're looking at the vastness of possible realities and how insignificant we all are in that. And our ego doesn't like that. A lot of mystery schools first give you the ability to to suppress the ego. The destruction of the ego is not good either, but it's the suppression of it to understand that there's a wider world out there. I think that's quite healthy, and I think that Lovecraftian work is healthy generally, because it opens that possibility up that your worldview and who you are as a person may not really matter that much.
In the scheme of things, it's nothing, is it? The fact that you're having a bad day or something is, totally random. But I guess it's a thing of Lovecraft being of his time. We had Einstein coming out. In a way, we were seeing a decline in the established religions, perhaps in the West.
There's a very Lovecraftian moment in Christianity when Christ asks his father to take the cup from him, and he's still hammered to the cross. How significant is his will to that of an elder god? It's something I explore in another Dracula story that's coming out soon.
Do you get any conflicts next? You're a practicing minister? Is that correct? Or
I was a member of the Liberal Catholic Church, basically.
We've spoken about this before with a couple of other guests, where there can be that conflict between the, for want of a better word, the strictly religious view, and then the fact that you're also into weird fiction or whatever. I think
look, my concepts of religion come from charity. It's mostly charity. I don't believe literally in constructs of religion. I look at it from sort of a Joseph Campbell point of view. One of the reasons that I became an ordained priest was to marry friends of mine who were LGBT and were denied the right.
That's fantastic.
So that's actually the story of how that happened, and I haven't have the right qualifications. But I don't see a personal conflict. I mean, I would consider myself a Christian. Yeah, I would consider myself a Christian because I believe that we have to help our fellow creature. And that's the key. That's the key for me of Christianity. The rest of it, I don't really get. I mean, look, Christ is a solar God. When he dies on the cross, the sun disappears. And that if we want to start getting into horror, it also states in the Bible that the dead rise when he dies as well. So I mean, look, there's a lot of stuff there.
Just look at biblical angels, right? If you want something,
the sort of the Enochian concepts of angels and stuff, and all that sort of thing. So I don't see a conflict, and there's been no spectral entity that's ever come to me and said, "You bastard, you blaspheming bastard." in true Monty Python style, there's going to be a big foot that's going to fucking hit me and squish me.
Yeah,
that hasn't happened. So I'm assuming that everything's all right in the world. And again, in the inconsequential nature of what I do, it's story. It's story and story. And I think it's important that we don't curtail story because of fear of blasphemy or whatever. You could say that to somebody of a different religion, the Bible's blasphemy.
Anne Rice, I think she went back to the church, but she said she was a follower of Christ, but not of the religion. She
did. I've read her books with Jesus, Christ the Lord series. Brilliant. Far better than her vampire stuff. Yeah. Far better. I am not a fan of her vampire stuff at all. Like I say, stick them in a Glasgow pub, they're fucked. But I have great respect for what she did and the writing style, and actually what she did for the LGBT community. Through those books, that's her lasting legacy, I think. I'm not a member of that community, but looking outside in, I would say that's the lasting effect that she has. She also wrote, if you want to look at factual theological stuff, she wrote a book called The Dark Heart of God, which was an uncompromising look at sort of Judeo-Christian concepts of God, which I recommend to people to read.
Chris, will you talk a bit about how inclusive your writing and all the projects are? Because I thought it was interesting when I first met you on another Zoom talk thing, that you had talked about this and the audience, because I think we still keep coming up against a lot of people that are very down on all of that within genre writing and science fiction and all kinds of things.
Oh, the Tolkien stuff as well at the moment, especially.
Yeah, that's all madness. That's what you were saying earlier about fandom ruining things.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about, right? So, okay, looking at it from a clinical business point of view, why the hell would you limit your product to only a one section of the community, right? Secondly, why, when you walk down the street, do you see carbon copies of yourself? Of course you don't.
Yeah.
So why would you write carbon copies of yourself in a book? You don't. You tap into a diverse range of characters, because that's what keeps your book and your comics and all of that stuff alive for people. The third thing is that for a story to be truly representative, you have to have people of different ethnicities, sexualities, gender identification. And look, I struggle with it all because I'm a straight white guy who comes from Ireland.
Yeah,
I know fuck all about these things, really.
Yeah.
But on the board of Stoker McAuley Productions, we have a lady who's transgender. And she's one of the most powerful women in video gaming. I've written for some of the cyberpunk Dracula stories, gender fluid, non-binary characters.
Yeah.
And the easiest thing to do in cyberpunk is write non-binary characters.
Yes. Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Right. And that's how I've dipped my toes into it. We're sort of I get asked by the BBC, can Dracula be black? And I said, what's the reasoning behind that? Now, that's a different story. I said, why are we so lazy? Why don't we craft a a character that is of colour,
Yeah.
and is a new character. But again, it's about branding, and it's about marketing, and it's about taking a brand and then just using the audience of that to tag along. Yeah. That's where I have a problem, because I think that's lazy writing.
Yeah.
It's also that association of black. So anyone who's not white is black, and that is supposed to represent 2/3 of the population.
Yeah, and look, you know what? I'm white, but I'm Irish white. You know, my wife's Canadian. She's a mixed race, but you know, it's that whole thing of, you know, when I came to Canada, it was the biggest culture shock out.
Yeah,
it was completely different. But even apart from that, even apart from the obvious differences, everybody that's sitting watching this chat and everybody who's in this chat, we all are different. We all have differences, and that's why it's never worried me. I mean, the old thing about, you know, Doctor Who's now a woman. No, that was an interesting one. Doctor Who's now a woman, and it's like, you know,
the outrage in some cases,
and it's like, I don't really care. Now my issue is the writing.
Yes.
I have a bloody issue with that.
Yes,
because and it was the same with Peter Capaldi's Doctor. I mean, Peter Capaldi's Doctor, the concept of the Doctor finally asking, "Am I a good man?"
Yeah.
And that's the reconciliation between himself and the Time War. And that's why he chooses the face.
Yes.
The face that the Tennant's Doctor saves, even though he's not supposed to, and that holds him to the mark. That was a brilliant piece of writing, but they never followed through with that.
That was, I liked that. Yeah. But then I've not been a fan of the latest. Just from the writing, I actually think Jodie Whittaker's done a very good job.
Aye, she's done. Like, it's watchable. Look at that. Sit and watch it. The last Dalek thing was all right.
She's done a great job with what she's been given. It's just that none of it's been memorable. And
instead of doing a proper Gallifreyan story, they made them Cybermen. Why did they make the Time Lord Cybermen? It's because you don't have to do a political story in Gallifrey. If you think of all the Gallifreyan stories they were all political masterpieces.
Oh, Deadly Assassin is one of my favourites. Yeah,
Deadly Assassin. That's Sean, right? And then you've got the character of the Master.
Yeah, I know. I've not liked
clown
that
type thing. He's He's basically the Joker. You know, and that's part of the problem that I have with the writing. I mean, I know other people are going to watch this and go, he's talking shite, and I'm probably going to shout and throw beer cans at the screen. But again, here's the other thing. I'm expressing why I don't like something.
Oh, yeah. Definitely.
Somebody else is equally entitled to express why they like it. And that's where it comes from. And it's like Star Wars. I had the privilege of talking to Ian. He was the Palpatine, McDermott, and he and I had a conversation last year, and it was after the last Star Wars film came out. He said, "You know, what do you think? Do you think that, you know? Do you think people liked the Palpatine thing?" And I said, "Well, did you enjoy doing it?" "Oh, yes." And I said, "Well, then isn't that all that matters? You know, did you enjoy doing that as an actor?" It's another viewpoint. I thought it was a bit weak, but then that's me again. I'm looking at it and saying that's probably now endangered my future Star Wars collaborations with Disney. But I would have, you know.
I had to go and watch it again because I'm a huge Star Wars fan, as you probably know from my Facebook page. I fell asleep in the middle of the film. And I'd been waiting for this to come out, and I was so excited. How were they going to make things different from the last one, which was very contradictory to everything that had been set up? And I actually fell asleep in the cinema.
That's a damning indictment right there, isn't it?
Says something. I mean, this is like me falling asleep at a Phil Nephilim concert. It's not going
I've actually sent a text message to Terry Harden saying, "Sorry, I'm trashing the last Star Wars film." But I'm not in a way. It has to be uniquely personal experience. Look, when you're a creative, and you guys know this, it's a uniquely personal experience for every person that's reading it. I have had my share of 1 and 2 star reviews.
Yeah,
and that you have to reconcile that. You know,
the courses, isn't it? It's
You can't write or produce. I had a big argument once with a guitarist, but well, that's another story slightly.
that's the standard working with
Yeah,
guitarists,
well,
mate.
But his view was when you play music, you should be playing to please your audience. And I'm saying, no, I'm playing for me. If you're doing a function band.
Yeah, if you're a wedding band or something, then yeah.
Fine. But if you're doing your own music, I do it for me. And if they like it, great. If not, they can fuck off.
I have a very unique perspective on it all because I have colon cancer and I'm terminally ill. And I was given, was it 4 years ago? I just got married and then I got my diagnosis and I was told, oh, you've got 6 months to live. Well, I've beat that and I'm going to be 40 in a couple of months' time.
Nice.
They didn't think I was going to reach that. So my perspective on all of it is I'm here to do as much as I possibly can and write and create stories and get stuff out. And I never take it personally when somebody says, that's the biggest pile of shite. Because maybe it is to them. And I get it. And it's, I mean, I got a 2-star review for Virgins Embrace. And what I did was I read what the person had said and took it completely in the chin and went, yeah, absolutely. Right. Yeah, it's not for you. And it wasn't for that person. But I ended up thanking that person for purchasing the product.
Yeah. Nice.
And saying, okay, maybe this range isn't going to be for you, but thanks for giving it a go.
Yeah.
And that's an adult and mature way to behave as a creative. And I think that we have to have that sort of response, regardless of where you're writing. And if people are watching this and they've always wanted to be a writer,
do it.
I'm a mentor in the Horror Writer Association. And a lot of my mentees, they come on to me and it's like they've finally done it at the age of 50 or 60 or whatever. It's great. But what held them back at the age of 30 was the fear of passing their manuscript out to the public.
Yeah.
And you have to do it. You have to, you just have to just say, okay, this is what I've written. I hope people enjoy it and go for it. I remember chatting to Grant Morrison about that. And he's another interesting character. Whenever I started doing the Dracula stuff, he rang me up. Now most people know that I wear black and white and I have a particular look for the Dracula stuff. And he rings me up. Well, big man, what's this about you and Dracula? I said, oh yeah. How the hell did you get that? And I told him. He says, you've got to have a look, man. You've got to have a look. You've got to have a, But he told me a lot about the things that he wrote and how he wrote for himself, and he wrote that these were stories, not necessarily even that he thought other people would enjoy, but he wrote for himself. And maybe that's another valuable lesson for folks out there. And never get hung up. But another thing is never get hung up about who's publishing your work. If your work's getting published, enjoy the fact that your work's getting published.
Yeah, I was going to say that you get a lot of people who have these unreasonable ideas. It's just like for me, just getting a story out there is the victory.
Yeah.
I don't have any illusions about selling millions and things like that. If somebody picks it up and somebody enjoys it, I'm happy.
Yeah.
No. And I'll dispel the illusion of it being, I've won awards now for my writing, and I work with New York Times bestsellers, selling people. That is not what this is about.
Yeah.
You will not make millions at this. What you will do is you'll be able to express yourself honestly, and if you're really, really lucky, you'll be working with a great community. And that's what it's all about. It's that writing with community and all of that sort of stuff, So that's what it's about. That's what I think once you pull back the curtain, that's what writing's all about.
I think that's a great place to wrap it up on that note, very positive note. So before we head back to the bus station, well, there's two things. The first is, where can people find you on the internet, and are there any particular things you'd like to promote at this time?
Apparently I can be found everywhere on the internet, so I've been told by my PR, so you can find me on www.stokerverse.com and www.dark-universes.com. So that's the sci-fi and the alternative horror stuff that we're doing as well. And you can also find me on heartofhollywoodmagazine.com, because I'm lucky enough to be published by them, and schlock.co.uk. and in Lovecraft Tuna. So there you go. So there's a few plugs.
Brilliant. We'll stick those link ups in the show notes below, of course, and a few other things we can find. All right, that's been great. Thanks very much for joining us, Chris. It's been a real pleasure to talk to you, and I hope you can pop back to Innsmouth someday. I just feel like we've got a load of other stuff to talk about as well. But, night is falling, and as I said before, we like to be out of Innsmouth by dark, so you get the pleasure of staying here overnight. I'm sure you'll have a wonderful time.
If you need a drinking partner, old Zadok Allen's always lurking about down the docks. He's always up for a few whiskies. So.
Really enjoyed it. Thanks, guys. Yeah.
So here we are back at Arkham Bus Station, and see our trusty driver has pulled up, punctual as always. Thanks very much for joining us on this visit. Thanks to Chris again for a great interview. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, thanks.
Indeed.
So before we go, we just want to let you know what we've got next time. We are going to be visiting Robert Bloch, assuming we can get into the library, and we're going to be reading The Faceless God. And I think we've got a visit to the cinema lined up as well.
Yeah, the old Picture House has got another corker on, The Abominable Dr. Fives.
Oh, top 5 film, absolute favourite.
Yeah.
So it's Bloch and Fives next time.
Yeah. Bloch and Fives. Yeah, solicitors or undertakers? Or...
Yeah, or both perhaps.
Both? Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
It saves on office rent if you do both out of the same building. Just be sure not to get your clients too confused.
Don't get your clients mixed up, yeah.
So we've got that coming along next time. Please keep an eye out. As always, you can catch the show on Patreon, or you can get it up on YouTube now as well. And on our Patreon site, you'll also see there's a link to a direct download. So if you right click on that, you can download the show to the the playback equipment of your choice, be it MP3 player, wax cylinder, whatever happens to you have. Just want to shout out again to our patrons for their continued support. So big thanks to Russell, Justin, Nick, Lee, Sharon, Chris and Anne. And if you'd like to join the ever-growing ranks and help us spread our tentacles further, please check out the Patreon site, where you can join 3 levels of patronage, and that gets you access to bonus content and Innsmouth News, of course, monthly copy of Innsmouth News, and 1 or 2 other goodies as well. So I think that's it for now. Thanks again for listening, and it's goodbye from me, Rob Poynton.
It's goodbye from me, John Chadwick.
It's goodbye from me, Tim Mendes.